Hey everybody. We're starting a new chapter here. Been a few days since I did one of these. So we had finished up Proverbs 25. And we're going to be looking at Proverbs Chapter 26. So it says, as snow in summer and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemly for a fool. So I guess what can we take from that? We know that snow in summer is a bad thing. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. Rain in the harvest, that's discouraging. Like, you're wanting to go plow your fields or harvest your grain, and it's raining out. That's not pleasant. So honor is not seemly for a fool. And seemly, I think, just means fitting. It's not fitting for a fool to receive honor and dignity in the same context, in the same way that it's not reasonable to have snow in summer or rain during harvest. And a fool in the biblical context is a person who denies the existence of God. Psalms 14 says, a fool has said in his heart, there is no God. So those who deny God, deny the reality of God, it always makes me think of people like Stephen Hawking and Degrassi and those type of what's the other guy? Richard Dawkins. Those evolutionist so-called scientists who are well-educated fools. They're foolish. They don't know anything of substance. They're well-educated in a fairy tale. It'd be like giving honor and commendation to somebody who is well-versed in children's stories. Three Little Pigs and Mary Had a Little Lamb, and they like, it would be so ridiculous to give high honor and praise to that person and consider them to be the peak of intellectualism. But that's what we do with people in the field of evolution. We call them these great scientists, the Bill Nye and people like that, and we put them on this pedestal. They're fools. That honor is not seemly for them. It's ridiculous to give honor to people like that. Verse 2, as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. This verse has always perplexed me. I really don't understand the analogy. A lot of these proverbs are analogies or similes or whatever you would call it, where it's comparing something to something else. So it gives you some sort of physical example of a spiritual reality. And so a bird by wandering and a swallow by flying. I'm not really sure what's meant by that. A bird wandering, a swallow flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. A curse without cause shall not come, in the same way that a swallow flies and a bird wanders. I just don't get that one. To be honest, I haven't spent much time praying over it to try to figure it out. I've just always kind of just brushed past it. I'm the type, when I'm studying things, I really don't want other people's opinions. Like, it irks me and grieves me when people come to a complex verse or something they don't understand, and they immediately run to a commentary. They immediately go to a pastor to see what their interpretation of it is. Because if that person is wrong, you now have that taint to your thinking process. I would rather just sit and wrestle over a verse with the Spirit of the Lord. Sit and pray and think it over, meditate, you pray it over, until the Lord reveals a thing. And then when you think you got a hold of it, then you can start testing it by the light of what other men in church history and current commentators say about it, to see if they've come to an equal conclusion, or if they can add some depth or insight to it. But you want to get it firsthand from the Lord. I often use the analogy of Adam and Eve. Adam was told by God himself not to eat from the tree. And from what I understand, Eve was told by Adam Adam told Eve, hey, God said don't eat from this tree. She didn't have that first-hand source, therefore she was more susceptible to deception. In the same way, if we don't have first-hand revelation from God, we're more susceptible to error and deception. We're going to fall for the teachings of men. We place our trust in the intellects, in the charisma, in the long-standing character of an individual, and so you put your trust in them to give you their interpretation. But if they're in error or they're wrong, you're going to get it wrong. So when I come to a verse like this, as the bird by wandering, as the swallow by flying, so the curse causeless shall not come. I could easily go and see, well, what are my favorite teachers? What does Spurgeon have to say about it? What does Piper have to say about it? Let me get Matthew Henry's commentary on this. Let me see the footnotes in my Henry Morris Study Bible says, or in my Spurgeon Bible. Well, let me see what the footnotes say. But I feel like that's too risky. These are the words of life spoken by God, and He's the master communicator, and we all have the Spirit of God. Everybody who's born again has the Spirit of God in them, has the teacher within them. There's no need to go to somebody else to figure it out for you. I think it's a lack of patience. People want to know right now, and so they rush out to a teacher and a commentator, and they find something that makes sense to them, and they grasp onto it, and that's their answer for it. But it wasn't Spirit revealed. The greatest truths are Spirit revealed. So instead of doing that, if I was, super desirous to know what the answer to this was, I could sit down with it and pray it over and think it over. Maybe look up definitions of words. Like what does causeless mean? What is meant by curse? So grab like a Strong's Concordance, which is just a dictionary, and look up the word curse, look up the word causeless. What was the definition of that word when it was used here? And then think through, what does wandering mean? How does a bird wander? And think that through and prayerfully meditate over it until I can come to some sort of conclusion. And then you can test it by the light of other men. But I think that's how error is perpetuated in the church. That people put their trust in their favorite teachers or commentators or whatever it is, or even footnotes in a Bible. Those are just opinions of men. People get a Schofield Bible or whatever is relevant and current today, and rather than sit and wrestle that out with the Spirit of the Lord, they just go to their commentators. And so then if their commentator's wrong, they've put their trust in that individual, so now they're going to be wrong in their thinking on that. And so, like I say, I think that's just how error is perpetuated, why we got so many errors in the church, because people are too quick to run to a teacher and a commentator rather than to wrestle it through for themselves. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the ass, and a rod for the fool's back. So you think, what does a whip do for the horse? It drives the horse, causes the horse to go forward, causes the horse to run. A bridle for the ass, my understanding is is it the same thing as a bit, the thing that goes in the mouth that you can turn and you pull and you turn the donkey. So you drive and direct through these means, and then it says a rod for the fool's back. That is the rod of correction, scourging or a whooping. It's something that I think unfortunately is lost in modern society. People make a big deal even about spanking your kids, but there certainly isn't flogging going on in the public square. But the scriptures tell us that's how you drive foolishness from a fool's heart. In children especially, we're told that spanking, corrective discipline is a good, wholesome thing. It has to be done properly and biblically, not done in an angry, violent way, but done in a loving, corrective way that drives rebellion out of the heart. And so it is as a person grows. A child left in rebellion or a lost person is going to go into a foolish lifestyle as an adult. And the rod is meant to correct that. The rod of discipline, the flogging, the punishment of the rod directs and guides and drives a foolish heart. The fear of those repercussions, the sting of the punishment, is going to cause the foolish person to stay on path, like a donkey, starting to turn. By pulling the bridle, you get him back on path. By driving the whip, you get that horse to go faster. And it's the same thing for a fool. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So it's almost like there's a seeming contradiction there in 4 and 5. It says, don't answer a fool, and then the next verse says, answer a fool. But the reality is, it's telling us how to answer a fool. It's saying, don't answer a fool, just out of, just in argumentative fashion, unless you're going to be like him. You're going to be just like the fool. And that's often how arguments go, is people are just looking to one-up or to win the argument, and you both look foolish just yelling at each other. Instead, it says to answer a fool, lest he be wise in his own conceit. If a fool is puffed up in their own knowledge, we want to shut that down with truth. Not with argument, but with truth. So I hope you can see the distinction there. There's much, much wisdom to be learned if you'll just sit and meditate on these two verses here, verses 4 and 5, so that we're not to answer a fool, lest we be like him. So if there's the possibility of being like this fool, if we're going to end up in an argumentative conflict of just foolishness, of just words, don't do it. But if that person is puffing themselves up and mocking or scoffing at the gospel, we shut that argument down by presenting the truth. Then if they want to fire back and argue, we let it alone. But we don't let them stand in their conceit and think they've won over the Lord. I was just hearing somebody say, I think it was MacArthur, about back in the day, and I was haphazardly paying attention. I was finishing up my workday, so it was just in the background. But he was saying, like, some newscast, I think, thought that they had found the tomb of Jesus and they would disprove the resurrection. So that's a foolish claim, all right? And God defending himself shut it down. It was proven to be a hoax. And so the fool, in his conceit, this media channel or whoever it was that was presenting this, was put down by some source. I don't know who showed it to be a hoax, but somebody stood up and answered that fool, lest they were wise in their own conceit. Shut that down with the truth. But nowadays, if you watch the media, turn on like The View or CNN when they have a conservative talker on there, or Fox when they have a liberal talker on there, and it's just arguments. It's, they're answering a fool according to their foolishness, and then they're just both fools. So there's a way to answer a fool and a time to answer a fool. And that's really, I'm scratching the surface there. That's really just a poor job of exegeting those, or trying to drive out or draw out some sort of wisdom out of those few verses there. But again, I would just say, if you really just focus in on 4 and 5 and do some prayerful meditation and bringing it to the Lord and asking him for revelation and just studying that over, you'll find some good insights there. But anyways, that was verse 5. We'll stop there, and then Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 6 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey everyone. We're in Proverbs Chapter 26. We read through verse 5 last time, so we'll pick up here in verse 6. It says, "He that sendeth a message by the hand of a fool cutteth off the feet and drinketh damage. The legs of the lame are not equal, so is a parable in the mouth of fools. As he that bindeth a stone in a sling, so is he that giveth honor to a fool. As a thorn goeth up into the hand of a drunkard, so is a parable in the mouth of fools." So a lot of information here about fools. In Psalm 14 it says, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." So I take a fool to be the atheists, the God deniers. The those would be foolish. And of course, anybody separated from Christ, anybody that's not born again, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So anybody separated from God, regardless of how educated or intelligent or how much worldly wisdom they have, they're foolish. There's no real eternal, substant. What's the word I'm looking for? There's no real, wisdom with them. There's no semblance of truth. Like apart from God, you can't really know anything with certainty. You're relying on your own logic, your own understanding, and that's flawed. So, a lot of these comparisons kind of fail my understanding. Like the legs of the lame are not equal, so is a parable in the mouth of fools. Binding a stone in a sling is like giving honor to a fool. A thorn going into the hand of a drunkard, a parable in the mouth of fools. So I'm not really sure what a lot of these, without sitting and thinking it through, what a lot of these analogies represent. They're not common analogies. They're not things that we would use in today's language. What does it mean to bind a stone in a sling? You think about David and Goliath, a weapon. So is he that gives honor to a fool, I suppose, because it's damaging to give honor to a thorn going up in the hand of a drunkard. Not really sure why that was considered, was that a thing back in the day? Did drunkards get a thorn in the hand? I suppose because you stumble and fall onto maybe a thorn bush or something. I don't know. But the overall context of those several verses is a negative thing, to give honor or to try to get understanding, because a parable in the mouth of fools, to try to get some, in a parable you're trying to gain some sort of wisdom, you're trying to get some sort of understanding. So to go to a fool to get that is a damaging, nonsensical thing. It's like, why would you go as a born again person? Why would I try to get life advice from somebody who's not born again? Why would I try to get life, eternal wisdom from somebody who has no connection with God? That would be foolish. To go to the philosophies of the lost, to the philosophies of the heathen. There's no wisdom in them. So why would I want to gain any sort of understanding from them? Sure, you can get worldly wisdom. I can learn how to fix an engine, or you can get medical information or something like that from somebody who doesn't know the Lord. They have book knowledge. They can have instructional knowledge. But when it comes to real, eternal, life-giving, wisdom that truly matters in the eternal perspective of things, there's no sense in going to somebody who doesn't know the Lord. It's foolish. It's damaging. And I think that's the overall theme there. Verse 10. The great God that formed all things both rewardeth the fool and rewardeth transgressors. So I think that's just talking about what is commonly known in Christian circles as common grace. The Lord is good. He gives goodness to the world. He gives sunlight and breath and comfort and food and shelter and love and compassion and pity to all peoples. So the great God that formed all things, that's our God, the only God, rewards the fool and the transgressor. He's kind to those who don't deserve it. He's good to those who are his enemies. So I would think that's what that verse is talking about there. Verse 11, as a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. That's a verse that is commonly quoted as well, because it just makes sense. If you watch a dog, he eats something that obviously upsets his stomach, pukes it up, and will go and eat up his own puke. A fool does the same thing. A fool, and we can all understand that, because in our lost days, you would go do something sinful, something wicked, that brings about some sort of consequence, some sort of chaos element to your life, and then the next day you turn around and do the same thing. There's no sense, there's no sensibility with the lost, with the foolishness. To just keep doing the same things, you think about like a drunkard or a drug user. You go and get drunk, you get in a fight, you lose a bunch of money, you get in a car accident or whatever it is. That is a direct result from your drunkenness, and yet the next night you'll turn around and go right back to getting drunk. A drug user, you get robbed by a dealer, you get sick. You get major health scares. You lose all your money. You sell your possessions to go get more. All these things that are direct consequences of the drug use, but yet you'll turn around and go right back to it. Fornication. You end up just, using somebody for their body, they end up using you. There's heartbreak. There's potential disease. There's children born out of wedlock, which is just completely destructive. It damages everybody involved, and yet you still keep going back to it. So it's the same way the dog returns to his vomit, a fool returns to his folly. So when we gain spiritual wisdom, when we start to get under scriptural understanding, when we start to see life in the light of the gospel, when we start to see life in the light of the scriptures, and get the godly perspective on things, when we start to see things from a righteousness perspective, we start to see it gives us foresight, where fools walk in blindness and just keep doing that repetitive behavior. The Lord gives us foresight to start to see, wait a minute, that brings about negative consequences, not to mention the rebellion against God. We're looking at it from just the immediate consequences. Everybody that sins is storing up wrath against themselves in the day of judgment, but the Lord is slow to anger and patient, long-suffering, and that's coming in a day. But we're looking at the immediate consequences of sin. When you're born again and the Lord gives you that understanding, that wisdom, that foresight, the scriptures talk about how we're able to walk circumspectly. We're able to walk with wisdom. We now have our eyes open. We can see the traps of sin. We can see the snares. And so we avoid those behaviors. We avoid those, like, to the point where it's even uncomfortable to be around those who still live that lifestyle, because there's a spiritual awareness in you that says, this is dangerous. These people are bringing destruction upon themselves. I don't want to be anywhere near this. And so, like, that, if you claim to be born again and you're hanging out with lost people, you're hanging out with people that are considered fools in the scripture, you need to carefully examine your heart, because those with the Spirit of God in them are not comfortable around lost people, around the destructive behaviors of the lost. It's an uncomfortable situation to be around sin. Our own sin grieves us, let alone to sit amongst those that are bringing about destruction upon themselves. It causes us to flee from that. We don't want anything to do with it. So that's the wisdom that comes from the light of scriptures. So if you're going back into repetitive behavior that leads to destruction, it's foolishness, and that's what that scripture is getting at here. So that was verse 11. We'll stop there, and then Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 12 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey everybody. We're continuing on here in Proverbs Chapter 26. We read through verse 11 last time, so we'll pick up here in verse 12. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There is more hope of a fool than of him. That's just saying, a person who believes themselves to be right, in conceit. So it's like an arrogant, prideful, know-it-all type, wisdom, so to speak. A person who's like that is going to be way harder to persuade even than a foolish person. So there's more hope for a fool than for them. A person who's convinced in their own mind of their own arrogance, of their own superiority, intellectually or otherwise, is just going to be really, really hard to get through. I think about that like in the means of salvation too. Like in one sense, from the eternal godly perspective, the gospel is an impossible message for all, because all hearts are dead in sin. All hearts are stone and unable to hear spiritual realities of God, unable to process, unable to think it through, unable to come to righteous conclusions. So the gospel is an impossible message. It has to be wrought with the power of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit has to move upon a heart and give ears to hear and give eyes to see. So in that sense, everybody's on equal footing. We're all dead in trespasses and sins. We're all equally incapable of coming to God. But from a humanistic standpoint, from our horizontal viewpoint, looking at individuals and different types and classes of people, it would seem to us that those who are arrogantly persuaded in their own mind are going to be the hardest to reach, just because you can't conversate with them. You can't get them to even consider what you're saying, because when a person is and I've been here, I struggle with pride myself, so I understand this with firsthand knowledge. When you think you know the answer, you close your ears to whatever's being said to you. It's basically going in one ear and out the other. While a person's talking to you, all you're thinking about is how you can prove your point or how you can overcome their objective. Like, you're not really processing what they're saying. You're not in a teachable spot. And that's that conceit, that arrogant, and like I say, I struggle with this. I struggle with pride, and so I understand this completely. But in the means of salvation, like you think about, if you talk to like a religious person who's convinced their religion is correct, convinced that they are right, you're going to have a hard time getting through to them. But again, eternally speaking, it's all impossible. So, and God can do whatever He wants. That's why we preach the gospel to every creature. God can even move upon one of those hearts and awaken them. Verse 13, the slothful man saith, there's a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets. We read a similar verse in an earlier proverb, I think. Just a slothful, lazy person just uses any excuse not to do work. There's the fear of, I can't go out there. There might be a lion out there. Lions roam the street. I'm not going to go do that. I could get eaten. So regardless of how unrealistic their concerns are, they'll latch on to anything as an excuse to not do what they're supposed to do. In the past, I've done that because that's another sin that I've struggled with, is laziness, like waking up or trying to wake up in the morning and not wanting to go to work, and reasoning within myself, thinking, all right, I've got a slight headache, that's a reason not to go to work, or I got a kind of a toothache going on, that's a reason not to go to work. So just finding any reason. Verse 14, as the door turneth upon his hinges, so does the slothful upon his bed. So there's a lot of, I guess, I don't know if that's, it'd be interesting to see if there's like a scientific reason for that. It says that the slothful man will toss and turn like a door on its hinges, so it will toss and turn while sleeping. I wonder if that's just because the built up energy that hasn't been used throughout the day because you've been slothful. Maybe like an energetic person who works hard, they go to bed and they're just out and they don't move. But a slothful person will just toss and turn. Like I say, I wonder if there's a science, like a physiological reason for that. 15. The slothful hideth his hand in his bosom, it grieveth him to bring it again to his mouth. So that's one that's always kind of perplexed me. Like, what exactly is meant by that? Was that a common saying back then, to hide the hand in the bosom? Like, what does that even mean? Like it's not something we do. Like, you put your hand in your bosom. to bring it to your mouth? Is it just showing that the lazy, slothful man doesn't even like to move? Like, it's a chore to even, raise your arm or do menial tasks, like, just get up and go get something to eat. It's like, oh man, I don't want to get up. It's just anything that requires energy. So I wonder if that's what that's saying. But it's interesting that whoever wrote this proverb here, I would assume it's Solomon. I'm not sure if all the proverbs are Solomon's. I think there's one with King Agar. So I think the rest are Proverbs, or the rest are Solomon's. But it's interesting here that he goes to the slothful sluggard, several verses in a row here. I wonder why. If he was just dealing with some slothful people in his life, or what the deal was. But the sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. So not only is the wise man in his own conceit hard to persuade, but the sluggard in his own conceit. And that's just a man who has convinced himself that he's right in his actions. And even though there's 7 men arguing against him, trying to prove it against him, he can't be persuaded. And that conceit, that pridefulness, it's almost the opposite of having a humble, teachable spirit. There's a balance, because there is an acknowledgement that like, in today's society, it's considered like noble or good to be so open-minded that you don't assume there's any absolute truths. Like, what's true for one person is not true for another. That relativism, or whatever it's called, that's considered like a moral high ground, and that's asinine. Like 2 + 2 = 4. There's a truth to all things, and so we have to balance the fact that yes, there is a truth, and we stand on that truth, and it's the scriptures. So we have that absolute foundation on one side of the coin, and on the other side of the coin, we remain humble and teachable, and meek. And I suppose it's just understanding, like, for me, it's and again, I struggle with pride, so I deal with this. But if I'm going to be persuaded of anything, it's got to be done through the scriptures. You have to show me scripturally. So the teachability there and the humility would be, perhaps I don't understand something in the scriptures correctly. Perhaps I'm missing something. Perhaps I haven't seen a certain verse in a proper light. So the teachability and humility there would be, if you have a counterpoint to my argument, if you have a disagreement to where I stand, your position had better be backed in scripture, because I'm not going, like, I'll hear you out, but honestly, like, I know the absolute truth of the scriptures. If your position is not scriptural, then it has no real bearing. It's fallible. It's like a vapor, just, here today, gone tomorrow. It's a movable thing. It's subjective. It's ethereal. It's not a tangible reality. But like, the scriptures are the absolute truth. So the teachability and humility would be, bring me the scriptures. I want to remain teachable and humble to the scriptures. So, and the opposite is a sluggard, or the man who's wise in his own conceit. It's his own imaginations, his own hearts. He's come up with his own ideas of what's right, and nobody can talk to him otherwise, because he's persuaded and convinced in his own arrogance. There's no teachability there. So anyways, that was verse 16. We'll stop there, and then Lord willing, we'll pick up in 17 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey everybody, we're continuing on in Proverbs 26. We read through verse 16, so we'll pick up in verse 17. It says, "He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears." This is a key verse for me, about minding your own business. There's this in the drug culture, which I was saved from. We had this saying, "Snitches get stitches," and like it's almost like just a pride thing. Like people don't snitch. That's like in that culture, that's the lowest of the low is a snitch. But in general, I think that's something that's missing perhaps in the Christian community, is this tattletale mentality. It gets lumped in with the goody two shoes. Like, yes, you're supposed to be good and wholesome and righteous, but you're also supposed to mind your own business. You don't go messing with something that doesn't belong to you. And in this particular case, it's talking about strife, like an argument or a fight. If you see somebody arguing and fighting, don't get involved. But the overall general theme is to live, in the New Testament, it says we're supposed to strive to live quiet and peaceable lives. So the overall context of the Bible is that as Christians, we're supposed to mind our own business, to stay in our own lane, yes, we preach righteousness and we preach the gospel and we preach against sin and we call people to repent of their sins and to be born again. But we aren't the moral dictators of the world. It's not up to us to grab people by the shirt collars and make them obedient. People can't be obedient to the scriptures unless they're born again. Our only job is to proclaim the gospel, because by it, people are born again. And part of the gospel includes calling out sin. But what I'm getting at is, other than that, like if your neighbor, smokes weed, would you call the cops on that? That's foolish. Like, mind your own business, stay in your own lane. If the opportunity presents itself where you're talking to them and you can remind them that it's a sin, and you can try to use that as a gateway to remind them of their sinful condition and their damnable state. But it's if you see two people in an argument or a fight. So I guess I'll come back to this verse, but then the overall theme there is just to be like a fly on the wall, where when we're not preaching the gospel, when we're not doing ministry, we ought to be almost invisible in society. We ought to just keep our heads down, work hard, be quiet, be loving, be forgiving, be kind, be gentle, but to mind our own business. It's none of my concern. It's not up to me. Okay, here's an example. Something small. When I was a kid and we were well, never mind. I won't share that. Because I'm kind of getting off topic here, but this verse just reminds me of the overall theme of just living a quiet, peaceful life. It's a personal irritation of mine to see snitches and tattletales. It's like, come on, mind your own business. Worry about your sin. Worry about your heart. Work out your own convictions. Leave everybody to the Lord. Yes, present the gospel. Yes, call sin, but it's not our job to police the world. And so in this particular case, it's saying that if you see people in an argument, not to get involved. If you see people in a fight, not to get involved. If you can make peace safely, do so, because blessed are the peacemakers. But it says that if you go meddle in somebody else's argument and fight, it's going to turn against you. And it uses the analogy of grabbing a dog by the ears. Go grab a German shepherd or a pit bull, by the ears and try to pick it up. It's going to hurt the dog, and he's going to attack you. He's going to lash out at you. And so it is when you try to interject yourself into somebody else's business, when you try to interject yourself into somebody else's fight or argument. In most cases, it's going to turn against you, and now you're going to get attacked. So don't meddle in other people's business. Mind your own business. If you can make peace, which requires wisdom and caution and prudence, then by all means make peace. But otherwise, if you see two people out on the street about to fight, don't go up and try to play peacemaker. Come on, guys, calm down. It's just going to turn against you. if you can, again, I want to emphasize that, because yes, we are to be loving, kind, peacemaking people. So if you can, if there's a wise, gentle, prudent way to make peace, by all means do so. But this proverb is telling us that if you interject yourself into somebody else's fight, it's going to turn against you like a dog would if you pulled it by the ears. Sorry I rambled there. I had a thought about, like I say, it's just personal irritation with the tattletale snitch mentality. Verse 18, as a madman who casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, so is the man that deceiveth his neighbor and saith, am not I in sport? So I take that to mean, am I not in sport is, I was just joking around. I was just kidding. To lie or to deceive your neighbor and then to just play it off as a joke or deception. It says it's like casting firebrands, arrows, and death. You're causing chaos into that. You're firing weapons at that person. You're adding aggravation and bitterness and irritation to a person's life that need not be there, by saying I'm just joking around. I remember one time I was just with a little kid, just something small, like, this isn't the exact example, but let's say you do the I got your nose thing. You pretend you have the kid's nose. And then I got called out by maybe an older kid, saying, you don't really have their nose. And then I say, I was just joking around. And the kid said, so you were lying? And that convicted me. I was like, man, this child is right. I'm just joking around, but it's a lie. Now that's small. You're not gonna offend that little child. Well, in a sense, you're adding stress and aggravation if that kid really thinks you have their nose. But that's the idea there. Like, you're firing damaging things into a person's life by doing fibs and fabrications in a jesting, joking way. And it's not the Christian way. A Christian is supposed to be honest and truthful in their speech and full of integrity. People ought to know that if you're a Christian, when you say something, you mean it. That you can be taken at your word, that everything you say is factual and true as far as you know. Verse 20. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. So, man, this last section of 26 is good. There's a lot of good, practical, applicable wisdom here, and good analogies too. If you take the fuel away from the fire, you take the wood away from the fire, fire goes out. There's nothing to burn. So if there's no talebearer, somebody perpetuating a story or gossiping or slandering, or just stirring the pot, strife will cease. Where there's no instigator, a talebearer, a slanderer, a gossip, a liar, a person that's just a hypocrite with flattering lips. Those are instigators. Those are like wood to a fire. They're the ones that cause the problem, stir the pot. So where there isn't somebody like that, there's no strife. There's no issues. As coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So in the way that you use coals and wood to start a fire, another really good analogy here. So a contentious man kindles strife, ignites fighting, ignites a problem. A contentious man is an argumentative, confrontational, an aggressive fighter, a verbal sparrer, somebody who wants to just initiate. That's the contention. They want to argue and debate every point. They want to have conflict. They're the ones that are kindling strife, igniting problems. So in both cases here, the talebearer and the contentious person, you don't want these people in your life. And it's convicting to me because I'm not a talebearer, but I have often been contentious, and there's a major part of my personality that is contentious. I used to say that I would do it for the sake of conversation. I'm not good with small talk, so a lot of times, in order to ignite a passionate debate, I'll take the opposite position, or I'll do the devil's advocate, so to speak. I'll present an opposite position just to get a passionate conversation going on. But that often is done in a contentious, barbarous, frictionless way that causes people to eventually grow wearisome of me. Like it's hard to be around somebody who's always in a debate mode. And that's what this is. So like I say, it's convicting to me because that kind of contentious, debating, argumentative attitude is what kindles strife. It's what causes arguments. It's what causes fights. So anyways, that was verse 21. We'll stop there, and Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 22 next time. All right, I love you. We'll talk to you later. Hey, everybody. It's been a long time since we've done one of these. It seems like they're getting fewer and fewer. I just have a hard time finding time to fit this in with my schedule. But we left off we're reading through Proverbs Chapter 26. We read through verse 21. So we'll pick up here in verse 22. It says, "The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly." You know, I'm sure we all are familiar with that old saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Reality is the exact opposite. Like sticks and stones, or a beating, or a punishment, physical injuries, you recover from that pretty quickly. But words pierce. It's like an emotional, psychological damage to hear somebody say something about your character or whatever. In this case, it's saying a talebearer. So I don't know if that word means a gossip, or if it's separate, if it's like somebody who breaks secrets, like you've entrusted something, or they just lie about you. But in either case, somebody's saying something about you with the intent to do damage to you, with the intent to make you look bad. And it says it's like a wound that goes down in the innermost parts of the belly. In the scriptures, the belly is the seat of emotions. So it's an emotional damage. It cuts deep. Like I remember, like when I was 13 or 14 years old, somebody said something in front of my girlfriend and my friends, just put me down in front of them, and it damaged me to such an extent that I can still think about the pain today. Here I am, what is it, almost 25 years later, and I still think about what was said. So the damage of words, you think about like parents who ridicule or just do so much psychological damage to their kids, and how that affects them as they grow up. I'm sure we all have people we can think of that have something that prevents them from being emotionally stable or psychologically stable, and it probably stems back to their childhood and the things that were said to them. I can think of some kids who, like, will desperately seek the approval of their parents. Every time they do something, they're looking to their parents, to see if they get a nod of approval or a look of joy. They're so consumed with that, and that probably stems from criticism. I know other people who have an incredibly hard time making decisions because they were ridiculed or put down. Everything they did was wrong in their parents' eyes. I can think of like my own personality. I had very loving parents, but grew up with a lot of criticism and that's affected my psyche. It's affected my personality. So words are very damaging. How we speak to each other. The Lord, the New Testament says we should speak only kind and loving words to one another, that we ought to build each other up with our words and not tear each other down. Another Proverbs, I think, or it might be a Psalm, I think it's a Proverb, says the power of life and death is in the tongue. And that's not literal. We don't have the ability to kill people with our words, but we can damage people psychologically where we tear them down, and perhaps, yeah, they end up killing themselves. So it does kill. Or we can encourage and spur on and build up and be wise, because in our criticism is meant to edify, to build up, not to tear down. So often when we make a criticism, the motive in our heart is to shame that person. Like if you stop and really think about the interior motive, it's to get a one-up, to see yourself as superior to them in some light, or to humble them or shame them. It's not really to encourage and build up. In the book of Revelation, Jesus addresses 7 churches, and I think he shows there how to do biblical corrective criticism, corrective chastisement for edifying purposes. First, he begins by praising the churches for what they've accomplished. He praises them for the good they're doing, and then says, but you've got this one issue here, and gently reminds them of the things where they're in error. And like that ought to be the heart. If we're going to correct somebody or bring some sort of critique, it ought not to be selfish or to humble or shame. It ought to be to build them up. And so we ought to go into that thinking, how can I say this in an encouraging way? And I think the Lord gives us the example. We praise them and point out all the good things that we're seeing, and then say, but we've just got this one area here that I'm seeing, and so it's a gentle correction rather than a stinging critique, because words really do damage. The way we speak to each other affects. We have to be loving and kind, and that doesn't mean, like, people often mistake boldness and enthusiasm and like courageous stand for truth. They'll mistake that as meanness or being crude or the opposite of gentle, not having tact or whatever. But sometimes a stinging, piercing word, a strong rebuke, is a loving thing. So it's the motive of the heart determines the tenor of the tongue, so to speak. Like if you're pure in your heart, like you really are seeking often like bold, aggressive, stinging remarks in a spiritual context are done for the glory of God. The glory of God is at stake. There's some error that needs to be corrected. There's something that needs to be addressed because it detracts from the glory of God, the honor of God. So there's a distinction there when we're bringing a rebuke to somebody else. We need to make sure, there's a distinction between critique and corrective edification. There's like this fine line, and I think it all boils down to the motive of your heart. If you're coming into that impure, if you're coming into that to show them that they're wrong, to shame them, to humble them, to somehow bolster your position, to show that I've got this right, you've got this wrong, or anything like that, it's going to be wrong. It's going to either injure them, or in the case of many mature people, we've learned to build defenses against that injury. And so we'll just reject what's being said to us outright. We won't let it come into the heart because we've been hurt by words, because we've been hurt by correction. So if we sense that it's approaching that, and a lot of times it depends on again, motive and delivery, we'll build a wall and we won't hear, we won't listen. So it's very, very important that we temper our tongues, that we test our motives, that we say, before I say this, am I doing this to be critical, to put down, to make myself look better? Or am I saying this out of sincere love and care, wanting to see the betterment of this person? Or am I doing this because the glory of God is at stake and the zeal of the Lord's house has consumed me and I must speak? So there's distinctions here, but the talebearer, the one who's just, you get this sneaky, going behind the back, talking about people impression with that word, talebearer. It also makes me think of like tattled tales. You're just saying something to get somebody in trouble. There's no desire to see their benefit. So a talebearer is just exposing secrets or slandering or gossiping or putting people down to make themselves feel better. And to encounter a talebearer, to have somebody speaking ill of you, wounds. So we just have to be cautious with how we talk. Verse 23, burning lips and a wicked heart are like potsherd covered with silver dross. Not sure what that is. I don't know what a potsherd is. I think it's like, it makes me think of pottery. I don't know if that's where we get our word pottery. Covered with silver dross. So is it something like earthy clay, but shined up to look nice with silver dross? And if that's the case, it would say that a wicked heart's like that. There's a hypocrisy there. There's a hiddenness. There's a whitewashed tomb. The outward looks good with the silver dross, but the inward is dirty. I don't know if that's what that's saying, but that's kind of the impression I get. I'd have to look up what potsherd is and exactly how dross works. I know that dross is put through the fire to purify. Like, I think it's the impurities in silver, but I'm not sure. 24. He that hateth dissembleth with his lips, and layeth up deceit within him. So a person who has hatred in their heart dissembles with his lips, tears down with his lips. Again, speaking, it's all about the speech. And layeth up deceit within him. His impure motives has like this, flattery is the word that comes to mind. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. So yeah, when he flatters, when somebody who is a hateful, wicked, and that's, a Christian ought not to be hanging out or getting advice with lost people, because they don't, regardless of how nice they appear to be, or how kind, or how benevolent they appear, they don't have Christ in their heart. And so at their root, there's going to be selfishness and evil. The wicked, the lost are evil, like we once were. All they have is that impure, lost Adamite heart. Regardless of how much they clean it up on the outside, the inside is still impure. It hasn't been purified by Christ. So you want to be careful about who you befriend or who you listen to. A person who speaks fair, ultimately there's selfishness in the heart. It says there's 7 abominations in them. I don't know. I think 7 is the number of perfection, they say in Jewish numerology. So maybe that's just given the idea of it's fully mature wickedness in their heart. It's totally depraved. But it also makes me think of Proverbs 16, which says there's 7 things that the Lord hates. It talks about pride and lying lips, hands that are swift to shed blood, or something like that. So maybe it's talking about these. In any case, a lost person, or specifically in general lost people, and in specific somebody who you know to be an impure person, when they speak fair, you can't trust it. You can't trust flattery. I think I'll stop there. That was verse 25. And then, Lord willing, we'll pick up in 26 next time. All right, I love you guys, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey, everyone. We're picking up here in Proverbs 26. We read through verse 25, so we'll pick up in verse 26. It says, whose hatred is covered by deceit, his wickedness shall be shewed before the whole congregation. So this is talking, let's see here. What's the context? I think this is referring back to the talebearer in verse 22. Words of a talebearer are wounds, go down to the innermost part, burning lips, wicked heart. Or no, it's he that hateth dissembleth with his lips. So that's the context. He that hateth layeth up deceit within him, speaketh fair, 7 abominations in his heart. His hatred is covered by deceit. His wickedness shall be shewed before the whole congregation. So this is about the flatterer, the person who's insincere, the person who's hiding their wicked intents towards you. It's a selfish person who genuinely and truly does not have your best interest at heart, but is only self-seeking, looking to get themselves over, to get some sort of advantage. It's defined here as hatred. A lot of lost people might not recognize, that there's hatred in their heart. There's a self-seeking. That one of the greatest distinctions between a believer and a non-believer is the selfishness that's in a lost person, which is eradicated in a step-by-step sanctification process in the believer. But in the unbeliever, there's all desires are at the core root of them have some sort of self-seeking in it. That doesn't mean that lost people can't do good things externally, can't provide benefits and act kind and nice towards people, but the real root, the real heart, the real motive inside of a person who's separated from Christ is a selfish motive, whether that's done through getting the praise of men or adulation or just there's some sort of selfishness that drives the lost person. So there's never a genuine, like I remember when I was lost, I didn't have any genuine, sincere friends that I knew I could rely on no matter what. There was always an awareness that everybody is seeking their own. It's an everybody for themselves type attitude that exists within the lost culture. And that's why as Christians we're told to be separate from that, to come out from amongst that. If you're born again and you're still associating and hanging out with lost people, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position. You simply don't belong to that kingdom anymore. There's a distinction between you and them, not because of anything you've done, not because you're better than them, but because the Lord has transformed you. The Lord has called you out of that kingdom and given you a new heart, a selfless heart. That exists within the Christian. And again, that's tainted because of our nature, because we're still stuck in these lost bodies. But we're on a path of sanctification where we are becoming more and more selfless on a day-to-day basis. So you just have to be careful. A person who pretends to be your friend, or if Christ isn't at the root of them, you have to know that eventually lost people are going to do what lost people are going to do. You're going to get hurt by them. You're going to get backstabbed. There's going to be some sort of betrayal. There's going to be an ulterior motive, because there's that mindset at the core of the Adamite nature that says, I have to get mine. I have to make sure I'm taken care of. So that's kind of what this is getting at here. Verse 27 says, whoso diggeth a pit shall fall therein, and he that rolleth a stone, it will return upon him. So that's just reaping what you sow. If you're deceitfully trying to trap people or trick people or get some sort of advantage over somebody, that's going to backfire on you. It's going to come back upon you. You're going to reap what you sow. And again, that's why a Christian doesn't have to worry about vengeance. We don't have to worry about making sure that we're vindicated. The Lord will take care of that. Our duty is just to love, to show compassion, And it is a life of sacrifice. Often we have to humble ourselves and allow ourselves to be wronged without seeking vengeance, without seeking to get back at somebody, to just trust that the Lord is going to do righteously. The Lord is going to do what is right. And these actions are going to pour back onto that person. And then verse 28 here, it says, a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. Let me re-examine that here, that a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it. Okay, so that's saying when you lie, there's actual hatred towards that person. You don't care about the benefit of that person when you lie to somebody. You're seeking own, you're seeking self, you're seeking your comfort, or you're trying to avoid your shame, or whatever it is. So again, it's the word hatred is used. It's just that it's a lack of care about the other person on some level. Now, there's degrees of that. You know, you might not even be consciously aware that you're trying to hurt the other person when you lie. You're just trying to cover your own tracks, but you're really damaging the other person. And the scripture says that that's hatred. You're hating the person that you afflict with your lies. And a flattering mouth worketh ruin. Flattering, again, is just flattery is like the heart of insincerity. It's not honest. It's not genuine. So it says it works ruin. It creates destruction and chaos. So that wraps up chapter 26. And Lord willing, we'll start chapter 27 next time. All right. I love you guys. We'll talk to you later.